Hello, people. Yes, it's your man here coming at you once again, coming at you from Diasporan African News Info Connect. And once again, it's Diasporan African News Info Connect, connecting diasporans around the world. So today we're going to be talking about digital colonialism. Now, what is digital colonialism, you say? Digital colonialism is the new frontier in controlling the world. And as you can see, it's to do with digital and data. Basically, right now, as we head into the fifth generation of technology, it's more, it's no longer commodities. It's data, which is essential. Data is ruling at the moment, and whoever controls data basically controls, well, pretty much the world. As you can see, your Bill Gates and your, Zach Zuckerbergs, the guy that owns Amazon. I'm not quite sure uh, what his name is, but this is a big problem because us, once again, us Africans and us blacks, we fall back again. And we really need to be careful because this is a tool which can be used against us, and it's probably is being used against us. So we have to be wise about this, and we have to fight this and find out mechanisms to overcome this. It's the new frontier, and I I urge Africans to wake up to this. All blacks around the world to wake up to this new age of data transfer and data control. So at least we can get a monopoly of this data control and be able to free ourselves from colonialism. So with that being said, I'll leave you with the clip and please enjoy.
Something big is going on with data. Data is not just big in terms of volume, as reflected in the phrase big data. Something transformative is happening with data. Now, we've known this since at least the revelations of Edward Snowden in summer 2013. The real story of those revelations was not the one emphasized in the media about the surveillance by NSA and GCHQ of ordinary and sometimes, as in the case of President Merkel, less ordinary citizens. The real story was how much data corporations were already collecting from us, from which governments simply sought to benefit. A story about the public-private surveillance partnership, as US security expert Bruce Schneier calls it. And in this lecture, I want to look deeper into what's going on with data, and I'll be drawing on my forthcoming book with the Mexican-US scholar Ulises Mejias called The Costs of Connection. Now, the core point of our book is that what's happening today in digital societies, where data harvesting seems such a natural, such a basic feature of everyday life, is not just a development or even a new phase of capitalism, as many writers have claimed. It's something even bigger. It's a genuinely new phase of colonialism that will, in time, provide the fuel for a later stage of capitalism whose full shape we cannot predict yet. And this is what we start to see if we shift the timescale from the past 30 to 40 years, in which for sure capitalism has become embedded into ever more sectors of daily life, to the past 500 years, over which the relations of capitalism to colonialism have played out. We're thinking about colonialism here in terms of its fundamental historical function, as the appropriation of resources on a vast scale. In 1500, and for the next 400 years, it was territory that was acquired. It was the resources of the land, and of course the bodies, for a long time those of slaves, needed to extract value from those resources. Today, the resources being appropriated are us. Human life in all its depth, extracted as value through the medium of data. But Ulysses and I, when we talk about data colonialism, we do not mean it as a metaphor. We are claiming instead that what is going on with data today represents potentially as far-reaching an appropriation of resources as the conquest of gold and territory in historic colonialism. A land grab in digital territory that is likely to have as far-reaching implications as historical colonialism did. A colonial reality, not a metaphor, which we are living and to which we need to wake up. Think of the terms of service to which we sign up every time we install an app, every time we join a platform. That's my phone, by the way. In normal times, I don't mean the few days after the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke. In normal times, no one reads the terms. We just click accept because we want to get on and use the app or the platform. Sometimes our acceptance is just assumed, no questions asked, though the GDPR has tried to disrupt that assumption. Sometimes our employer encourages us to use a Fitbit to monitor our health, which requires us to accept Fitbit's terms and conditions, whether we like them or not. Or we may be required to accept terms and conditions of data extraction by an insurer, or by the supplier of a smart appliance in our home. But by that act of acceptance, actual or implied, we enter into a whole set of what Ulysses and I call data relations that unfold in ways we understand only very partly. It sometimes seems a mystery how we can accept so much with so little resistance. But let's think historically through a colonial lens. Let's think back to a document used in the early days of the Spanish conquest of Latin America called the requerimiento, or demand. Almost exactly 500 years ago, the document was drafted in 1513 at the Spanish court. Conquistadors would ride up to a mile or two outside a village whose gold they wanted and read out this document in the middle of the night in Spanish, a language they knew the locals did not understand. Here's a little of it. But if you do not submit, I accept. I certify to you that with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highnesses. We shall take away your goods and shall do you all the mischief and damage that we can. The next morning, they will ride into the village and take the gold that they wanted, using whatever violence they needed to do so, and usually more. Now, you'll notice immediately a difference, that we really do click accept. And so no violence is needed to take our gold as we use the platform or app whose terms appear to us. I'll come back to why that is in a moment, but first, let's try to map more precisely the key features of historic colonialism onto data colonialism today. The fundamental moves and historic function of original colonialism can be understood in terms of 4 levels. The appropriation of resource, the creation of new social relations to stabilize that appropriation, the extreme concentration of wealth that flowed from that appropriation, and finally the ideologies that were used to tell a different story of what was going on, most notoriously the ideology of civilization. And we see exactly these same 4 levels at work with data colonialism. First, there is the appropriation of resources, I've said. Human life itself, human experience and action become a direct input to capital. This is often told to us as a cliche, the idea that it's just worthless human exhaust that is taken, something just naturally there anyway for the taking, which conveniently forgets all the mechanisms that are needed to gather, format, extract, and process this supposedly natural resource. Second, social relations are being colonized by data processes, as all social relations increasingly take the form of data relations that maximize data extraction for value. Third, the economic value that's extracted is hugely concentrated in the vast wealth of new colonial corporations, what Ulysses and I call the social quantification sector: Facebook, Google, Amazon, and so on. And finally, there are new colonial ideologies that seek to disguise what is going on. Not the idea of civilization exactly yet, but the idea that we must always stay connected, that everything must be put into data form so that, for example, we can get more personalized messages and products. And the idea that all of this, including the tracking, is somehow inevitable. So we can see all four dimensions of historic colonialism at work in our life with data today. But there's one crucial difference. Unlike in 1500, when colonialism emerged without the background of 2 or 3 centuries of capitalism, today's new colonialism builds on top of the already existing social order of capitalism, which is why it does not generally need violence to be effective. Let's not suppose, however, that this massive transformation of social knowledge will play out equally for everyone. As important research by Virginia Eubanks and others has shown, it is populations who are already vulnerable and poor that are most likely to be harmed by hidden, data-driven judgments made against them by government departments, service suppliers, credit raters, insurers, and so on. By the same token, these same people are the least likely to be able to resist. It costs money to mount a legal claim. And when they look for work, the low-paid work that they can get is likely to come with the compulsion to accept still more surveillance than is normal in higher status work. A social world then is emerging where vulnerability to, forced acceptance of continuous surveillance is likely to become a leading dimension of inequality. Is there a risk that in this critique we're idealizing the past quietly? When, of course, populations were victimized, stereotyped, excluded silently from resources. I don't think so, provided we are precise about what is in danger of dropping out of our picture of the social world as this new form of social knowledge installs itself. And there are at least 3 answers to that question. First, and most directly, we are in danger of losing hold of those older models of social knowledge and the categories that they generated. For example, the idea of poverty as a socially caused phenomenon that can only be understood by attention to all the socioeconomic factors that are statistically correlated with it. As Marion Fourcade, an earlier speaker in this lecture series, wrote, older rationales for giving the poor more favorable terms because they were poor, that is, socially disadvantaged in ways we understood, have now in America largely been replaced with the idea that the terms of credit ought to depend solely on one's prior credit-related behavior. That is, on the risks those people pose within commercial risk systems, as tracked, of course, by impersonal algorithms. Second, we risk losing hold of older forms of expertise and judgment that are not respected by the new model of social knowledge. So American legal theorists who've studied algorithmic processes in local governments and the courts conclude that opaque algorithms risk, as they put it, hollowing out the decision-making capacity of public servants. Why? By creating a distance between their decisions and the evidence gathering on which those decisions still have to rely. Third, perhaps most dangerous of all, we risk all of us losing the habit of expecting that our knowledge